Blog Talk Radio.
Choices, decisions, frustrations, and pain. Knowing I'm going to forget her someday. While I still can, I'll challenge all my loved ones, every friend, to look inside their hearts and understand that I will love them. I will love them while I still can.
Well, hello, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host and founder of Alzheimer's Speaks, Lori LeBay, and we are going to have a brilliant show for you today, one that I think is such a needed and important conversation for us all to just take a pause and listen to what the needs and what the thoughts of others are. You may or may not agree with everything you hear, but you know, how often do you? This is a time to expand your mind and your heart. And I encourage people to listen with compassion. And I also encourage people to call in and participate in the conversation. But before I introduce our guests, and we've got quite a few, we've got a panel of 10 for you to hear. We have decided to devote the full 2 hours to this show, this taboo discussion about life and death with dementia. But I want to first, again, because we always get new listeners, explain a little bit about Alzheimer's Speaks, who we are and why we're here. Bottom line, we are an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. We believe by joining forces and sharing knowledge and having these everyday conversations about life with dementia, we're going to be able to remove the stigmas attached to memory loss and help those living with the disease live with purpose. Together, we can help everybody understand the true needs if we just sit and pause and take a minute and truly listen to one another. Ask those core questions that sometimes are spooky because we're not sure we want to hear the answers. Alzheimer's Speaks believes collaboratively we can win this battle against dementia, and I know that it's working because the power of all of us working together got Alzheimer's Speaks recognized as the #1 influencer online for Alzheimer's disease. And that recognition is not about us. It's about all of us, because it's your clicks, your likes, you taking that moment in time to just tweet us out, share it with your Facebook friends, share it with your LinkedIn groups, having a conversation, because so often there are people touched by this disease that are close to us that we don't know because no one's brave enough to have the conversation. So today we've got 10 very brave souls talking about a very taboo topic, and I hope that you'll all be appreciative and respectful for their time and consideration and their thoughts that they're going to share with us on this topic. I always get questions from people in terms of how do I participate in the show. And so if you're listening online, you can utilize your chat box, and I'll be monitoring that as the show goes. I'll try to pull in as much comment and questions as possible, but this is a pretty packed show. If not, we can always have a second show and a follow-up show. You can always call in as well to the line, and that is 714-364-4757. Again, that's 714-364-4757. And then you'll just have to push 1 to get into my queue so that I know that you're there. And again, when I see a break in the conversation, I will come back out. There's some resources that I think are important to mention, just a few associations. The Alzheimer's Disease International, which is the association of all Alzheimer's associations around the world, is a fabulous place to be able to go and gain knowledge, information, and stats and find what is closest to you. There is also the Lewy Body Association, and we also have the Frontal Temporal Lobe Association. These are critical and different types of dementia where I really think that you can find some additional support for both you and your loved one that you're caring for. The Alzheimer's Studies has a Tau clinical trial going on now. So if you just Google Alzheimer's Studies, or you can go to the Alzheimer's team on Facebook. And then, of course, the Purple Angel Project, started by Norm McNamara over in the UK, which is really all about utilizing one global symbol, the Purple Angel, to help identify and raise awareness for dementia. So let me get on to today's show. Our title is Life or Death with Dementia, the Taboo Conversation. And again, we're going to be devoting the full 2 hours to this conversation, and we have a variety of people and their thoughts on living and dying with dementia. Should one have the ability to decide when to end their life? If so, when and under what circumstances? We'll hear from those living with the disease, care partners, doctors, authors, hospice workers, attorneys, and advocates. And again, we'd love to hear from you as well. My guess is you're going to be pretty dang surprised on what you hear in this conversation, because I'm telling you, I'm pretty experienced and knowledgeable, and I was shocked at some of the things that I learned. And I think everyone needs to know. I would also like to just note that Alzheimer's Speaks understands and appreciates that not everyone is going to agree with any or all of the comments on the show, and I never expect you to. This is about a conversation. This is about freedom of speech. This is about learning what the true needs and thoughts are out there, because we can't help people if we don't have conversations. So again, I urge you to call in and join the conversation. Let your opinion be heard, or feel free to write me afterwards, or comment on the blog. That'll have a bigger audience if you want your comment heard versus the radio show, just the way I push things out. And we don't really take a stand one way or the other on Alzheimer's Speaks. Again, it's about having a respectful conversation, sharing knowledge, and sharing perspectives. I think that is critical. Our goal is to get the topic off the taboo list. It's our belief that we need to learn more about how everyone deals with this diagnosis, and not everybody deals with any diagnosis the same way. So why should we think it should be any different with dementia? I would like us to really go with the flow of what are the needs of those with dementia, what are their concerns, how can we help them live better with dementia. To me, this is really what the show is about. Quality of life, and how is that defined, and helping people define that, giving them some tools to do that. This is not a show where we're going to talk about, dive into specific ways on how to end your life. It's going to be a very wide, broad topic here. And we're going to learn, again, from a lot of different angles, which I think is very, very critical. So what questions do you have? What thoughts of yours do you want heard? And again, we encourage you to not be quiet on this topic. Just like dementia is blooming over in the UK and starting here in the U.S., people are becoming dementia aware and dementia friendly. This is all part of that process. So first, I'd like to introduce Michael Ellenbogen. He is really the thought leader behind this show. Michael is the one who approached me and said, Lori, this can't wait any longer. It's time. And so for those of you that don't know Michael, Michael was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's at the age of 49. Prior to his diagnosis, he was a network operations manager for a Fortune 500 financial institution. And due to difficulty at work, due to his disease, he was led to early retirement. Now he is a world-renowned Alzheimer's and dementia advocate. He's been featured in nationally syndicated TV, radio, and other media outlets. He's written for blogs, newspapers, websites, and has shared his personal perspective as a speaker. He currently serves on the Pennsylvania Alzheimer's Disease Planning Committee and other advisory councils. He's a regular speaker at the Advisory Council on Alzheimer's Research, Care, and Services, and has been featured in the Alzheimer's Disease International 2012 in 2012. He's interested very much in motivating those with Alzheimer's to raise their voice and reduce the stigmas of the disease. Michael is really one of the pioneers in Alzheimer's advocacy, and I am just thrilled to be associated with him, and I love working with him. If you haven't joined us for Dementia Chats, which he and both Dina Dotson, who are on the show today, are part of, I would encourage you to do that. So welcome, Michael. How are you today?
Great, Lori. Thank you for having me.
Well, what was the itch behind having this show? Why did you feel so passionate that this was so critical to do?
Well, first of all, let me thank you so much for allowing me to put the show together and addressing a subject that everyone was afraid to address. So many organizations out there say how they are out there to support us with dementia, but none of them had the courage to speak to us about this topic that so many of us want to talk about. It's basically taboo, even for the people living with it. I have found that almost, if not more, of all those living with YOAD, which is young onset Alzheimer's disease, want to take their lives early. At first, I thought it was just me, but as I went and checked into this, I found out that there were so many reasons that these people need a place to talk about it freely. For some reason, the older population who is living with dementia doesn't feel the same way, and I'm not sure why, but it's up to the researchers to figure that out. So for this reason, we must talk about this. People need to become more involved and help us and not turn a blind eye because it's happening around us every day, and the laws need to change. This is why this show is so important, Lori.
It really is, and like I said, I really appreciate the fact that you came to me to pull this show together because, in all honesty, it is one of those topics that's very, very difficult. For myself, I know that I find when I think about this topic, two different answers. For me, if I was in a situation where I couldn't control my body or my thoughts and wasn't able to live at a certain quality of life, I would like the right to change, to take my life and to be able to have a dignified end. But on the other hand, when I answer that question for my mother, who is in her end stages and has been for 4 years, I would have thought that I would have made the same choice. Yet in those 4 years, even though we're not able to communicate much, the depth of the moments that we do, I would have hated to lose. And again, I know that's making it about me versus her. But I do think that that's something that has to be thought about in the equation, because no matter what side of the fence you're on, we're still projecting a communication, because I think that has a lot to do with it. But I also think it has to do with perceptions of burden. So what would make you want to take your own life? What have you thought about a list of where you're at and what that would look like for you? You said you've talked about it, for yourself, and I'm sure, maybe or maybe not with family. But are there certain things, like in a living will or something, that you've thought about that this would be the point? No more would I want to be here. Michael, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know that was directed to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Michael.
Yeah, I'm one of those who wants to take my life early. But I also want to clarify, I don't want to take my life as early. I want to live life as long as possible while I have good years. People who have progressed, with this disease, they're suffering. People who have, I guess, a progressive disease today, they suffer, and they're allowed to be put out of their misery, with dignity and in a way, and they can die the way they want to. Like, for example, after many years of battling with cancer, my sister one day said she no longer wanted to live, and she was going through a lot of pain and suffering. She told her doctor that morning, and the doctor said it was okay. The family was called. We all said our goodbyes within 6 hours. She had passed away and finally in a peaceful place and was no longer in pain. We all felt better knowing she was in a better place and no longer suffering. This all happened with a number of constant dosages of morphine, which kept being increased until she was finally at peace. We all know what happened. It's not talked about. It happens every day. And no, I'm not in a state that allows for assisted suicide by a physician, but this happens around us. But we choose not to speak about it. Okay. I have made the choice that I want to take some kind of concoction when the day comes and I can no longer be on my own. If I require for someone to take care of me or to babysit me, that to me is no longer life. There are many other reasons for my thinking this way. I live every day with many kinds of pain from non-related issues. I'm able to manage them today, most of the time, but I could not do that if I was in serious pain and no one knew it. Because of dementia, you can't communicate those things. That, to me, would be worse than torture. Then I don't want to be also remembered in what I've become. This is a devastating disease. I would like people to know me for who I was, not even for what I've become even today. Another issue, I would never want to put my wife and family through the hell that this disease will bring. No one should ever have to endure that. Then there's the reason that most people cannot seem to understand. I was able to save money, and I wanted the money to go to my family rather than waste it on me for something that will prolong my death in an agonizing way. One thing that most people don't understand is that while we look normal today, we're able to even communicate well at times, we are living in pain. While it's not physical, like cancer, but it's mental anguish, which can sometimes be even worse. Why would we not be able to be entitled to die with dignity, like other people who have a serious illness? All because we have some kind of dementia? Wow. This is a cruel world to make us suffer even more than any other disease. Please allow us to have that choice. It would be so great if we could make a decision today when I'm of sound mind to say at what point in my life I would want to be given the concoction so I can live as long as possible and I do not have to take it much longer just because of the thought as I may not be able to remember. That's the real disaster to my family and I. So I plead with the people here today to help change the laws so we can even stop the suffering and so we can die with dignity. That's pretty much it, Lori. That's the, what has to happen.
Well, and it is interesting, and we'll get into this more, but I did not realize some of the laws and how they came into play. And I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and pull in, I think we're going to go ahead and pull in Dr. Frank Kavanaugh and Robert Riveras for part of this conversation. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Dr. Kavanaugh, he serves on the advisory board of Final Exit Network, and he's been a health educator for 40 years. He is a retired professor of medical and public affairs at the George Washington University Medical Center and the professor of communications with an endowed chair at the George Washington University. He's a chairman emeritus of the International Academy for Preventive Medicine and the former vice president of the Cooper Institute for Advanced Studies in Medicine and Humanities. His years in the medical community helped him understand the tremendous advances that we've made to intervene in patients' health issues and improving lives. But also, too often, he found the medical community walks away from patients in the most critical time of their lives when nothing more can be done to relieve suffering. In addition to Frank, we also have their legal counsel here, Robert Riveras. So I would like to, welcome Frank. How are you today?
I'm fine, Lori, and I thank you and thank Martin so much for having this dialogue. The more we can talk about it, the more it helps people to make decisions that are there for them. You talked a bit about how I came to this from my years in the medical center and what I wanted to do when I retired. And I should just say a little bit about what Final Exit Network is. It is a nonprofit organization that's been around since 9 years now, and we are 3,000 volunteers and members who believe that mentally competent adults have a basic human right to end their lives when they suffer more than they can bear from a terminal or an irreversible illness, and that we believe that such a right shall be an individual choice, including the timing and the compassion, free of any kind of restriction by the law, by clergy, by the medical profession, even by friends and relatives, no matter how well-intentioned they may be. It's important to note that we do not encourage anybody to end their life, and we do not provide the means for them to do so, and we do not actively assist in a person's death. We do see this as the ultimate civil right of the 21st century, just like women's suffrage was in the 20s and racial rights in the 60s and the rights of the disabled in the 90s. And we operate basically by exercising our First Amendment right of free speech. And for members who are suffering from an irreversible medical condition that choose to end their life and are accepted into our program, we provide them with pertinent information about how to end their life in a painless, quick, inexpensive, humane fashion. And should a person choose that kind of self-deliverance, we have a number of safeguards in place to make sure that the decision is voluntary and repeatedly asked. We provide the most current information and caring support for folks. And information can be found about us on the website, finalexitnetwork.org, and there is much more about what we do there. Alzheimer's is a particularly different issue for us because when you look at Huntington's disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, like Stephen Hawking has, and so forth, they don't necessarily have the window of opportunity that Alzheimer's has. And I often look at myself and say, if I were diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I would probably get a second opinion from a very good neurologist. I would get a third opinion from another very good neurologist. And if they all agreed, then I would take 4 or 5 months and clean up all my affairs, and I would hasten the end of my life, because I can't think of anything worse than losing all of the memories and the recognition of my loved ones and all of that. Now, there is a window of opportunity in there where I have understood that I've been diagnosed with this disease. I know where it's going to go over some period of time. If I wait too long, I will no longer be able to cognitively to do the simple task to acquire the means, or physically, perhaps, the simple task to actually hasten the end of my life. So I have to make a decision while I still have that mental and physical capability to do those things, that I wish to proceed with the end of my life and to hasten the end of my life. And, that is a very individual decision. I would not suggest that anybody else in that situation should do it. It is an individual human right, and we just have, I think, the freedom to choose for ourselves, not for anybody else what they should do, but for ourselves what is right for us when we begin to lose what we regard as all quality to our life that makes it worth living. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot. I'd like to point the question to Sir Rob, your legal counsel. Is this legal? I mean, what are some of the pros and cons and difficulties? I would imagine with any controversial topic that there are issues that you have to face with this. So could you speak to that?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Lori. By the way, it's Robert Rivas. The biggest issue is that there are many in the law enforcement community who perceive their individual statutes in the states across the country. Again, 37 states have laws against assisting in a suicide. Our understanding of those laws is that they may only be applied in this country in light of the right to free speech. They may only be applied to somebody who actually commits a physical act of assistance or provides the means by bringing something to the person who chooses self-deliverance. We feel like what Final Exit Network does is legal all across the country, because Final Exit Network does not lift a finger to provide any physical assistance, and does not bring anything to the scene to provide any kind of assistance in anyone's death. After careful analysis of the circumstances of the person, confirmation of the severity of their condition, Final Exit Network volunteers provide information and education, counseling, moral support, show people how to do it, and ensure that they're not going to botch it, which is a terrible fear a lot of people have, because they could wind up worse off than they were before if they botched their effort to cause their own deaths. So Final Exit Network is just a group of people who do that without performing what is legally defined as being assistance. We have this question pending in the state of Minnesota, where there's a law that prohibits people from giving information to anybody or providing any kind of moral support. It's a crime in Minnesota to say to somebody who intends to hasten their death to say, I understand what you're doing. I believe you're doing what's right for you, and I respect your right to do that. That would be labeled criminal encouraging in Minnesota, and so far the courts of Minnesota have sustained our view that can't be made a crime anywhere in the country under the First Amendment, and that there has to be, in order to prosecute anybody for assisting in a suicide, there has to be some kind of active assistance, which Final Exit Network doesn't do. And how that relates back to what Frank was saying is that during this window, if somebody, in the case of a dementia patient, as they progress through their experience and evolve to a point where they are soon going to become incapable of giving fully informed consent and making a fully informed decision on their own about what they're going to do, once they cross that threshold, Final Exit Network can't help them anymore, and Final Exit Network can't do anything, provide any emotional support at the bedside or otherwise give any information. We'll just sort of have to terminate any efforts to provide them with support once they get to the point where they can't physically accomplish their own self-deliverance and where they're not mentally competent to make that decision. So a lot of people, even though they might have otherwise had some period of time left in their lives, a lot of people make an intelligent decision that they don't want to go past that threshold, that they don't want that window of opportunity to close. And in those cases, Final Exit Network is willing to make the decision to give support to people with proven cases of dementia who are making a thoughtful and intelligent decision to hasten their death, because we just don't think it's up to us to second guess their well-considered choices.
Well,
Lori, we approach that very carefully, too. I don't want anyone to feel that it's something that is rushed into hastily. A person who comes to us, first of all, has a phone consultation. They're required to submit material in writing. They're required to submit their medical records. Those medical records are evaluated by a team of physicians and psychologists. The person then has a face-to-face interview, and only after all those steps have been gone through, if they make the determination that the person is indeed making a rational decision, is suffering to the point that they can no longer bear, only at that point will we provide them with the information and support. So there is very much of a vetting process before anyone gets this information and support.
Okay. Well, it was really interesting what Robert was saying about Minnesota, because that's where I live. I did not even know that was going on here. And, it's very surprising. All of the information that's out there that we just can't all know unless we have conversations like this. So it's so critical to do this. I'm going to go ahead and pull in Derek Humphrey right now, and I'll pull you guys back in. But Derek is on a time frame here, and I don't want to miss out on his input here. So I very much want to thank Frank and Robert for their input, and we will come back because you guys are all kind of mixed together in this. So Derek Humphrey was married for 22 years when his wife developed inoperable cancer. He nursed her for 2 years until she asked him to help her die. Close to the end, Jean chose to end her life with lethal drugs to avoid further suffering. In time, Derek married again and moved to America, and in 1978 he published a little book, Jean's Way, describing her final years and his part in helping her die peacefully. It became a bestseller and was translated into major languages. The public response to this book caused him to start the Hemlock Society in the U.S. in 1980 from his garage in Santa Monica. And the Hemlock's purpose was to help people in similar situations to Jean's and also reform the laws to permit physician-assisted suicide. Jean's chosen way of dying basically prefigured the laws later passed for physician-assisted suicide by prescriptions. Jean's Way helped change the debate from voluntary euthanasia to an acceleration of death by terminal patients choosing to drink a prescription lethal potion. Such laws now exist in a few states: Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Vermont. Derek built the Hemlock into a national organization with over 40,000 members and 80 chapters. So don't think for a moment that this topic is not being discussed and that people aren't talking about it. we need to learn about this more. In 1991, he wrote Final Exit, which is a how-to book for the dying to bring their suffering to an end if they choose. To his surprise, it became a bestseller within 6 months. It's been translated into 12 languages. Random House keeps the 3rd edition of Final Exit in print and is still in print in Spanish and in Italian. USA Today in 2007 chose it as one of the most significant books in the past 25 years. That's pretty incredible. Welcome, Derek. How are you this morning?
I'm pretty well, thank you. Thank you for asking, and hope you are well too.
Yes.
Sounds like it.
I'm thrilled to have you with us, and I'm wondering, you are really a true pioneer in this whole thought process of dying with dignity. And can you share with us some of the specific conversations that you and your wife had to come to this conclusion? I mean, I can't imagine it was an easy choice, and it had to have been a difficult conversation. But maybe I'm wrong. Can you give us some insight into that?
Well, because this happened back in 1975. In fact, she asked about dying, first of all, in 1974. And the topic of right to die, euthanasia, assisted suicide, whatever you call it, was not really in the public field. I had never heard, although I was a newspaper reporter on the London Sunday Times, I hadn't come across the subject. It hadn't raised its head publicly. But Jean herself thought this through. She'd seen her mother 5 years earlier die a painful, unprepared death from lung cancer, and she wasn't looked after properly with pain medicine and so forth. So in the the long time that Jean spent in cancer wards in Oxford Hospital in England, she saw a great deal of death going on, and she made her own philosophy as to what to do about her own. She realized that death would come to her before too long. So one afternoon, when I went in to see her, and she'd been very, very ill. I thought she was going to die the previous week, and so did the doctors. But she pulled through. She didn't want to die, and she just said to me, "I'll cut it short. I want you to help me to die." And I was so ignorant at the time. I said, "I will, but what do you want me to do?" I hadn't thought through what one does. And she said, "Go to a doctor, ask for a lethal overdose of drugs, put them to one side, and when I'm ready to go, you hand them to me, and I take them and die." So it was her philosophy. And she told people around her, her close friends, she didn't broadcast it, but her close friends, she told people that was what she was going to do when the end came.
Okay, that had to be, I mean, it had to take you just kind of back, but then you can understand where somebody is coming from when they've gone through it and they've seen it, and, everybody wants to live the perfect life. Everybody wants to just go to sleep and die in peaceful, but it's not like that for most. And, there's, I think, great fear in terms of being a burden to others and, not being able to care for yourself. And, all of that comes into play, with that. When you went to the doctor, what kind of response did you get there?
Well, he grilled me as to what her medical condition was, and then what had been happening, and what treatment she'd got, and what drugs she was using, and where the situation was. And after I told him, he said she has no quality of life left, and she won't last much longer. Her bones were already beginning to break because the cancer had spread to her bones. And he said, "Here's the lethal drugs. Just never say where." Of course, we were acting illegally back then in 1975, and he said, "Never let it be known that I was the person who handed this." And he gave me the drugs, which I took home, put away carefully, out of sight and out of touch. And 6 months later, she asked me for the drugs. So it was not hasty. It was a very thought-out decision, and only when she was ready to go. But she had the forethought to think ahead. She didn't want to go like her mother had gone.
I see. Now, can you tell us a bit more about the Hemlock Society and exactly what do you do? I didn't really get into that, and if you could share a little bit more about what the organization is about, that would be wonderful.
Yes, the Hemlock Society I started in 1980, 5 years after Jean's death. And it was because of the reaction to my book, Jean's Way. Enormous amount of people approached me and said, what were the drugs? How was it done? What are you going to do about it? People said, are you going to change the law? So I had hundreds of letters came in, because I was then working for the Los Angeles Times, so people could just address letters, Derek Humphrey, Los Angeles Times, and they would get me without a full address. And I realized I had to do something about it. There was a public demand, and I gathered like-minded people around in Los Angeles, and from the universities and medical people and legal people, and we decided to start the Hemlock Society, and which would give advice and counseling to people about ways in which they could consider taking their lives now if they were dying at the present, and that with a second bow to our fiddle, we right from the start said we are going to work for intelligent laws on physician-assisted suicide, so that it would be doctors who were really involved in this, not the families. It would be the individual. Families would know, but we felt that the medical profession, because it has the power over drugs and it has the knowledge of terminal illnesses, should be involved. And it's been a long fight to get those laws, and the Hemlock Society has not done it alone, but we've been a big helper in getting some laws passed already. But the Hemlock Society disappeared in 2003. I'd retired from it, and it was merged into another organization. So it doesn't exist at the moment, the Hemlock Society.
Okay, but there's another organization similar to the Hemlock Society that it merged into?
Yes, well, the Final Exit Network.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does the similar work.
Okay. Okie doke. Wonderful. How did you feel when you had to keep battling this all the time? With the laws and things. I can imagine that there were some pretty passionate discussions that you went through and
yes.
could get fairly heated. Because people have their religious beliefs and I think all of that's wonderful. Everybody has different beliefs, but trying to get people to respect that there's more than one belief out there, and how to get that through. So what was that like in terms of just trying to tell your story and persuade people of the need?
Well, luckily I was fairly well prepared. I was an investigative journalist all my life, and I'd done quite a lot I'd written books about police corruption and racial prejudice and so forth, and I'd been on television debating these hot topics for 10 or 20 years before I came into the Right to Die movement. So I had a sort of grooming in advance of how to handle these matters. And so when the controversy started, and it did, we were debating in universities, on the radio, on television, in Rotary clubs, and also we were much in demand to debate this, and it was very exciting and worthwhile. And we met a great many supportive people and a good many non-supportive people. But we found a base for our feelings, and it grew and grew.
Okay. In terms of, I appreciate you so much taking the time, and I know that you have to run here in just a couple of minutes. If someone is in this quandary, like you were with your wife, asking to die, what would be the two things that you would suggest to them?
Well, one, think it over and talk it over with the closest family, if that is possible. Share this decision with the closest family to see whether you're acting sensibly, just to test your ideas and so forth. Secondly, I would say read my book, Final Exit. It can be got on the web, or it's just a paperback. It's not, and it's very, very readable. And third, I would suggest they consider joining the Final Exit Network and go about it carefully, thoughtfully, and wherever possible, involve close family and close friends confidentially.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us
today. May I just mention one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah, we have a special living will at my organization called My Last Wishes in the event of an irreversible cognitive decline. This is a unusual living will dealing only if you think you are going to get Alzheimer's or go into dementia. And it sets out over 5 pages, what if your condition deteriorated due to loss of cognitive function, then this is what you want would happen. You wouldn't wish to be kept alive. Now, this document helps. It doesn't have legal force, but it's an intelligent and thoughtful expression of your wishes should you go into Alzheimer's, that you would wish to be left alone and to die when you are incompetent. So quite a lot of people download this from our website and sign it. It's a comfort, and it's an intelligent indicator of your last wishes.
Which is a good thing. Everybody's encouraged to do living wills, and I think that that's a good conversation to have if you have dementia or not, so that everybody is on the same page. Because the fear and the guilt alone has got to be just horrendous. And again, for me, I could say that, I would probably want to be in that position to be able to have the choice if I choose to take it or not. But then I look at caring for my mom, even like I said earlier, she's been in her end stages for 4 years, and a lot of people would say she has no life or nothing to add, and she's not having quality of life. But yet we've had these few moments that have been really short but powerful and really life-changing for me. And, how do we know if those things are going to happen or not? We don't. And
no.
so everyone has to evaluate that. And is a moment in time, a few moments in time worth 4 years? I mean, you got to weigh that out as well. So again, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, but it's questions that we need to ask ourselves, and a discussion that is extremely important to have.
It's key to think your philosophy through, make preparations, sign a few the documents that you consider relevant, and then go on with life. Press on with life, but make some thoughtful preparations.
Exactly.
All
well,
right.
Thank you so much for your time today. And
pleasure.
And Final Exit is www.finalexit.org, and so you can feel free to go there. And Derek's book is available on Amazon as well. So again, thank you and enjoy your day, Derek.
Okay, thank you for having me. It's an interesting conversation.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Robert, I'm going to pull you back in because we're talking about living wills and how we want to end our life. If people put their wishes in writing, that still doesn't make it legal. Am I correct in that? How does that work? How is that interpreted?
Every state in the union now has a law regarding living wills, and it authorizes everybody to sign a document that explains what their desires are when they are in a condition where they're not capable of making decisions for themselves, and there is no prospect for them to get up out of the hospital bed and ever walk out again, and they're being maintained alive by artificial means. And it's an instruction to the healthcare facility, to the person's doctor, that they have made an intelligent decision back when they signed it to instruct them to discontinue life support under those conditions. It's not at all the same thing as either physician aid in dying or an individual's choice to actively cause their own death. It only applies in the circumstance when somebody's beyond the ability to make a decision, to express a decision on their own, and the doctors confirm that there is nothing that can be done for them except to either maintain them alive on artificial life support or not, and that the living will expresses the individual's choice as to how they want to be treated under those circumstances. Okay, great. Michael, I'm going to pull you back in and just see if you have anything that you want to add after hearing Derek and Frank and Rob talk a little bit about Final Exit and the Hemlock Society.
Well, I have to tell you, Lori, I think while I like what Final Exit is doing, what I don't like the idea is that many of us who are living with the disease are kind of forced to have to take their lives earlier just because the laws aren't there for us. If we could have the assisted suicide where we could plan ahead and to decide, I think it would be just so much better. And I think the people from Final Exit would agree, if the laws were to be changed to just be able to delay these things much longer. And that's what I think we should be working towards, is to not shorten these people's lives, but to extend them to be able to be longer lived and have a better life, so people aren't forced to feel that, well, I may not remember to take that concoction or to be able to do it on my own, and to be able to rely on somebody to help us, whether it's a family member to be able to do it legally, or to have it with the help of a doctor through assisted suicide by doctor. That's what we should be looking to change, and that's what I would hope that this program is going to reach out to the rest of the world to engage people to think that way.
Good point. And again, if we've got any listeners, we'd love to hear from you as well. What are your thoughts on this topic? Frank, is there anything else that you wanted to add? We kind of talked about, is it legal? And we touched on a few states. Did I cover the correct ones?
Yes, you did. Robert talked about Minnesota. We had initially Oregon with physician-assisted death and the right to die. There's now 15 years of experience out there. We've learned a lot from that. When that law was first passed, people said, "Oh, my Lord, they're going to be dropping like flies. This is terrible." It never happened. A very reasonable number of people, like 100 each year, get the medication from their physician. About only half of them take it, and I sometimes think that that's because they now have the control over the end of their life in their hands, so they can live another day, another week, another month, that sort of thing. Washington State was second. It simply copied what Oregon did. In Montana was an interesting breakthrough. Was a Supreme Court decision that said a physician could not be prosecuted for hastening the end of a person's life. And they did that without, any of the regulations and procedures that were part of the other two states. So that was very different. And then we have recently had Vermont. So we have 4 states now that permit physician-assisted dying. So it's going to happen all around the country. It's not going to happen in your lifetime or mine or in Martin's or any of ours, I think. I think it's going to take a very long time for this to happen state by state, and the tremendous effort that went into getting this passed in Oregon and the fight that just went on for years and years and years. But the good side is we're making progress, and we'll keep adding states. We're close in New Jersey now. More states will come online, but while that is happening, we just feel that as the volunteers of Final Exit, that we need to be there right now for the people who are suffering and need help. And, there are other organizations who work on changing those laws. But because it will take a long time, an awful lot of people will suffer in the process while they wait.
So so we've got Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Vermont, and then you said New Jersey is getting close, and Minnesota, where would you say that is in the process?
Oh, I'm confident that Robert Rivas represented this issue in the state of Georgia, took it to the Supreme Court, won it, represented it in Arizona. Nobody went to jail over that one, and he now has the prosecution on the defensive in Minnesota, and they may not appeal an appellate court decision. And Robert may wind up going to the Supreme Court again, but I'm confident that he will win. And I think that as other prosecutors around the United States look at the history of being tested at the Supreme Court, going before a jury, in each case the people who bring these cases lose them. So I don't think we're going to see a lot more prosecutions. At least I hope not, because the legal bills are expensive.
Oh, and how are those financed then? Is that through membership in the organization then?
Through donations. It's interesting. It's like, it's like, I want to say in some ways, it's like hospice. If hospice ever touched your life and helped you, supported you and supported your dying member, you wind up donating to that, leaving it in your will, setting up a bequest, that kind of thing. So the members of Final Exit and the public at large have supported us through donations. They've gotten us through these court fights, and they continue to. So we survive really on donations. We ask people to join, become members, and we say it's a $50 membership fee to join. If you can't afford $50, if you can only afford $5, we'll take that. Just join. The money is not that important, but we survive on donations. And the belief of a lot of people that this ultimate human right is one to support, just like you would support the American Cancer Society or the Civil Liberties Union or anything else. Support Final Exit Network and what it's trying to do.
Okay.
Lori, can I add to that? It's Robert.
Please.
One thing I'm very proud of as I kind of orchestrate all the work across the country in these various criminal prosecutions of Final Exit Network, I find that in communities where we need help from local lawyers, the best known names in criminal defense law, every place where we have a problem, jump in and offer to work for Final Exit Network because of their support for the cause for a tiny fraction of what they would have ordinarily been paid, to say represent a drug smuggling organization or the kinds of criminal defense matters that most criminal defense lawyers handle. There are so many examples. I don't want to name them, but in Atlanta and Arizona and Minnesota where we've had problems, we have never had a jury ever convict anybody in Final Exit Network of anything. We've never had any Final Exit Network volunteer enter into a guilty plea for anything but minor misdemeanors that were not assisting in a suicide. They were something else, something extraneous, just to throw them a bone. And we have in every community where we've had those kind of problems, the biggest names in the community among criminal defense lawyers jump right in and work for a small fraction of what they would have otherwise made, and I only get a small fraction of what I would otherwise made for my role. It's a real sight to see that we're able to work as inexpensively as we do. Another thing worth mentioning here, in the context of the contributions and membership dues that are asked for, that people pay to become members of Final Exit Network, I've occasionally had some people, totally uninformed people, try to suggest that that's got something to do with whether or not a member can obtain support in their exits and their self-deliverance. There's no connection at all. Most members of Final Exit Network contribute because they want to contribute to the general right to die movement, and it has nothing specific to do with any anticipation that they're ever going to ask for support in hastening their own deaths. And people do not pay anything to Final Exit Network that's directly related to the hastening of their own deaths. It's just contributions to help support the work of Final Exit Network and the movement. And when the day comes that anybody calls and seeks support in their own death, there's no charge whatsoever.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that's good to know. Go ahead.
Can I give you a little rundown about how Minnesota fits into the scheme across the country of these laws?
Yes, please.
There are 37, as I mentioned once before, there are 37 states that have a statute on their books that makes it a crime to assist in suicide. There are 3 states that now have, as you know, Oregon, Washington, and Vermont, that now have statutes authorizing physician aid in dying. But in each of those 3 states, there are elaborate protocols to make sure that the physician aid in dying program is fully complied with as far as their safeguards and everything. And even in 2 out of 3 of those states, there still is on the books a law that makes it a crime to assist in a suicide for anybody who's not operating under those laws. So people often get these concepts mixed up as if to suggest that in Washington and Oregon it's okay for anybody to assist in what is referred to in those laws as suicide. That's not the case. It still would be a crime. There's no statute in Vermont, but there is one in each of Oregon and Washington prohibiting assistance in a suicide unless it's a doctor and a patient operating under the constraints of that law. In Minnesota, the law specifically says that advising, encouraging, or assisting in a suicide are a crime. And to the extent that they have the words advising and encouraging in the statute, those are the concepts, those are the laws that are contrary to the free speech rights granted by the First Amendment to the Constitution. And those parts have been stricken down. So in Minnesota, there still is no law on physician aid in dying, and there still is a law that prohibits assisting in a suicide. But we think that the prosecution of the 4 final, or I guess there's only 2 left, Final Exit Network members in Minnesota are going to either not be prosecuted or are going to fail because the state has no evidence that anybody was assisted in a death. The state is proceeding only on evidence that the Minnesota law was violated to the extent that it prohibited advising or encouraging in a suicide. Having said that, I should note that Final Exit Network never advises anybody in favor of hastening their own death, and Final Exit Network never encourages anybody to hasten their own death, but the words advise and encourage are so wide open to different interpretations that practically anything anybody says in Minnesota could be interpreted as being within what's prohibited by the law against advising and encouraging, and that's why the law has been stricken down to that extent.
It's very interesting because how many laws are out there that we don't know about that, if you advise or encourage and it could be viewed that I'm advising or encouraging by having the conversation. And I don't view it at that at all. I view it as information and a conversation that needs to be had. I was at a funeral. I use this as an example of a young girl who took her life. And it was very sad, and she had some mental illness, and it was a friend of mine, and it was probably one of the most beautiful ceremonies I've ever been to, and some people were really uncomfortable with it, but I was so appreciative because the pastor talked about, why she took her life and how she took her life. And he was very passionate that this has to stop, that we have to understand and try to help and support people as much as possible so that they can live as long as possible. And it was very interesting because people don't know what the next guy is going through and what it's like to walk in somebody's shoes. And you had talked about with people, they were worried that if this law passed, all of a sudden everybody's going to start killing themselves, and that's not it.
And it's been proven nonsense.
Yeah, and I think Michael said that earlier. I just want the choice. I want the ability, and I think we'll hear that from others. It's kind of like abortion. Women want the right to make a decision of that which affects them and their body. And so it's such a personal thing, yet it's such a difficult decision to make. And whenever we have a difficult decision, it's nice to be able to bounce those ideas off people and to talk with others and to have support. And for us to avoid that, I think just adds more strain and burden to the person in that position contemplating all of this. And I don't think that's fair from a humanity standpoint, but that's how I look at it. Frank, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Again, I appreciate so much of your time for both you and Robert. This has just been wonderful information.
Well, I'm happy to learn from everybody else. There was one point before which I think is so important and almost has polar counter arguments to it. It is so important, as Derek said and Martin said and you have said and Robert said, to have these conversations with your loved ones so that they understand what it is that you want and that they will support you in your decision. It does, however, on the other side, come down to your decision. You may have a number of siblings who say, no, I don't agree with that. Well, fine for them to express their opinions and for you to impress upon them as well as possible that this is something that you want, and if they love you, you will honor it. But when there is a difference in family members, it is ultimately the individual human right. And we find as we work with people, in so many cases, the end of their life is like a living wake, and it's a celebration, if you will. But in other cases, it's not. In other cases, they're forced to die alone because family members disagree. They threaten to stop them if they knew they would stop them. Maybe you're hospitalized or Baker acted for psychiatric observation, those sorts of things. So it does finally come down to your decision. And for those people who find themselves in that situation, we don't think that anybody should have to die alone. So that we take it one step farther and we say, if you want us to be there with you when you end your life, we will be there, because we don't think that anybody should die alone. So the conversations are so important, putting your wishes in advance directives, in living wills, in healthcare surrogate forms. All of that is very, very important to do, but it does finally come down to your decision, and we think that you have that right in spite of however well-intentioned your family and friends may be.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We talk, I mean, I remember sitting down with my parents and doing their living wills, and we, the things that were brought up really were more physical aspects, in terms of if I can't do this and if I can't do that, but it didn't cover some of the mental and cognitive abilities. And just because we can't see the struggles doesn't mean that they're not there. One of my favorite visuals was Michael Ellenbach, and we were talking on Dementia Chats about him traveling in the airport and him asking for help. And they're saying, well, get in the wheelchair. And he's like, I can walk. I just need directions. I need someone to take me from A to B, but I can walk. And as a society, if we can't see it, we don't think it's there. And we try to, make people fit into this mold. And I think the mold has to morph and it has to change to meet the people's needs. So, again, I really thank you both so much for your time and energy and all that you're doing to let people have choice. So I thank you very much. And if people want to get a hold of you, they can just go to the finalexitnetwork.org. Is that correct?
That's correct. Finalexitnetwork.org. Final Exit Network is one word, and you will find there the forms, the contact numbers, all of that. If anyone wants to call for information, they can do that toll-free at 866-654-9156, and you will get one of our coordinators, most all of whom are psychiatric nurses, who will have that initial conversation with you. But people join not for really, as Robert said, as an insurance policy for the end of life, but because they believe in it. And if you believe in the cause, we'd like to have you join as well. So, and you can do all of that on the website, very easy, just with a click of the mouse.
Okay. And, again, thank you so much for all you're doing and spending time with us this morning. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye now. I am going to pull in our next expert, and this is a person who is living with the disease. Miriam Marquez is a mother of 4 daughters and was an attorney. She was diagnosed with a familiar form of Alzheimer's 4 years ago, and she's an advocate for a cure, and her activities with the Alzheimer's Western and Central Washington State chapter include being a board of directors, early stage advisory council, the Public Policy Committee. She is also a peer-to-peer advisor and an Alzheimer's Association ambassador to Senator Patty Murray and her staff. Miriam's interests include theater. She is a stage and independent film actress and other forms of arts. She loves traveling. She just returned from a trip from Kenya and Tanzania, and she loves long walks. And I'm just thrilled to have Miriam with us today. How are you doing today, Miriam?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to be part of this show because I really think this is just such an important conversation for us all to have. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are about living with dementia and being able to have the dignity of choosing when and how you want to die. So what are your thoughts about this whole conversation we're having?
Well, as you mentioned, I have a familial form of Alzheimer's. My father was one of 13 children. He and about 5 or 6 of his siblings died with Alzheimer's. I have older cousins, most of whom have Alzheimer's. Some don't. And when I came to a 4-way stop near my home on my way home from my law office, all of a sudden I didn't know whether to turn left or right or go straight. I panicked. It scared me. I went to my doctor and I said, look, this happened, and Alzheimer's runs in my family. They did all kinds of tests. And he said, Miriam, there's nothing wrong with you. In the following 6 months, every once in a while I would get lost while driving. And then on Thanksgiving Day, I went to my daughter's house, had a great time, and as I was getting ready to leave, I put my hand on the doorknob, and all of a sudden, I didn't know where I was. I told my family. And it scared me. That's when I decided that I needed to do something. I became active in the Alzheimer's Association. I've spent my time advocating for a cure, not necessarily for me, but I've got children and I've got grandchildren. I need a cure. We need a cure for my grandkids and my kids. I spend my time advocating, and I volunteer, as you mentioned, for the association in many ways. I watched my mother as she cared for my father, and saw him suffer until he died. Almost, as I mentioned, almost half of his siblings died with Alzheimer's. I don't want to die. I love life. I have an active social life, but I have thought long and hard about what if a cure or something to stop the progression doesn't come along. Before I began to show symptoms, I joked that I would put on the mantle of my fireplace something to take that would kill me, with a note that read, Miriam, if you don't know what this is, take it. But there are many of us with Alzheimer's who live alone. And because of my advocacy for a cure and being a member of many organizations, I've had discussions. And the majority of the people that I know say they have no desire to continue once they are unable to care for themselves. But of course, the question is, how will I know when the time is? I joke it's when I can no longer know how to wipe my butt. But I do have a living will that states that I want no artificial means to keep me alive.
Okay. And, I look at my mom's situation. She hasn't needed any artificial means, but she needs total care. And so, when we went through and did her living will, we put in all of those little normal ticklers that people think of. If I get pneumonia, don't give me the medicine, just let me die at that point, and blah, 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 blah. But we really didn't have a discussion in terms of, the what ifs. What if my body is healthy, but my brain's just not connecting the dots so that I can partake, in it the way that I used to. We didn't have, I wasn't aware of all of this stuff, and I don't know if it would have changed the family's decision or not. My mom was Catholic, and so she's, I think suicide would be very difficult thing for her to come to. Yet she was also one that never wanted to be a burden. And I think that is one of the things that I hear over and over from so many living with the disease is, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to have someone wipe my butt, like you said. I just don't want to go there. And so have you talked with your kids on this? I would assume that you have, since we're on the radio with this, but maybe not.
No, absolutely. Everyone. I mean, everyone in my family, all of my friends, are very clear on what it is that I want.
And how did they react to the conversation?
Well, you know, I'm a very independent person. I have been that way my whole life. I have a strong will, and they respect my wishes. They understand my wishes, and so I feel comfortable with that.
Okay.
Now here's the thing. You know, there is a fine line, or there's a fog. I call it a fog, but it's really a fine line. I mean, the question is, how am I going to determine when is the time for me to take the pills or whatever it is that's going to be? And I've joked, you know, like I said, if I put a message on that says, Miriam, if you don't know what this is, take it. Well, I don't know if that's going to happen. How will I know? I don't want, you know, I love life. This is probably the best time of my life. I'm having such a great time. I don't want it to end. That's why I'm such a big advocate for a cure. I'm out there shouting at the top of my lungs to help find a cure, at least something to stop the progression, not necessarily for me, but for my kids and my grandchildren. But how am I going to know when it's time to do it? I think about this often, but I don't know whether I will be successful or not. And I would be extremely disappointed if there's a part of me that is aware. I would be extremely disappointed if I miss my opportunity.
And I can understand that. That's one of the things I know that Michael mentions. And Michael, I'm going to pull you in for this. What are your thoughts on what Miriam is saying?
Well, I got to tell you, Miriam couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's the big concern. It's like, will we be able to remember to do this when we just start to get into those bad stages that we really want to do it? Because that's the whole point behind this. You know, and I agree with Miriam. This is a great time of our lives, even though we're probably struggling with so many different issues. But it's, my God, it's like when you get to those bad stages is when we want to hopefully remember. And I remember every day, I put it in my head, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I think about this every single day that I'm going to take my life just because I want it to stay fresh in my mind, that I hope when the day comes, I'm still going to remember. But we don't know that. And that's why I think it's so important that if we do miss that time frame, that assisted suicide is allowed so somebody can say, okay, Mike, this was the day you were waiting for. I understand you no longer remember to do that, but you need to take this. This is why it's so important for us to change things. So Miriam and I don't have to take our lives much sooner than necessary.
And I think that's a really important part, because that's so silly to die when you're still able to engage, just because that's the law. You know, that, you know, you're competent to make that decision. It just is, you know, and able to make that choice for yourself. That's the whole point of a living will, is when you're unable, someone can step in and make that choice for you and assist you in that process. And we're saying now, you know, with dementia, that, oops, that doesn't count. You know, when you're not competent to make that decision, you can't predetermine that choice. And so it's kind of interesting. You know, and again, I'm still not quite sure where I stand with it all. I think there's pros and cons, and I think, I don't think any of us can make this decision, you know, until we really, you know, have to deal with it. I mean, we think we know how we might react, but we don't really know until we're in those shoes. And this can be a long lifelong journey, like it was for my mom, of 30 years and still going. I mean, who ever would have known? With all of this time. Miriam, is there anything else that you want to add? I know that you have to get hopping, and I want to be respectful of that.
No, not really. I don't have anything more to say other than I really encourage your listeners to contribute to the Alzheimer's Association or whatever other organization that they support to help find a cure or something to stop the progression. It is so critical. If we don't find a cure, it will bankrupt the United States. The cost of caring for people as baby boomers age, it's going to be a catastrophe if a cure is not found. So thank you so much for your show. Greatly, greatly appreciated.
Well, thanks for joining us, Miriam. You have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you.
Before I pull in our next guest, I just do want to highlight some basic information here. Our last radio show was on Love in the Land of Dementia and what has love made you do? And it was a really interesting conversation of someone who has written a book, and the stories, and she read a couple of them, are really going to make you think, how do you love? How do you act in the land of dementia? It's very, very insightful. And then there's a woman who created a product, Remember Me Bibs, that's a very unique product as well, which was done out of love. Our next radio show, of course, will be next Tuesday at the same time, and we're going to talk about the reality of Alzheimer's disease. And we're going to have author Kathy Borey with us and neurologist Daniel Potts and his wife Ellen, and they're going to be discussing the Let Me Be Your Memory program, which is the first ever middle school language arts Alzheimer's awareness curriculum. So that's pretty exciting. If you weren't able to join us on our Dementia Chats webinar last week on the 22nd, we had a really good conversation on becoming dementia-friendly and aware and what the heck does that mean. And I would encourage you to watch that and share that with others because I thought it was quite powerful. And the insights of our experts living with the disease I thought were phenomenal. Our next Dementia Chats will be November 12th. And again, you're all invited to join. Those are free. On the blog, there are a couple of things I want to highlight. On the 27th, our intern Michelle did an article called Happy Hour, which was kind of a fun little article. I did one on the 24th, which had to do with the Verizon Boomer Party that I had. We gave away about $1,000 worth of product and why that was important to caregivers. There's just some new technology out there that I wasn't aware of that Verizon even had. I just thought they sold phones, so I was kind of surprised with all of that. And then there's also an article posted on October 22nd, which is an announcement of a free webinar that will be held November 7th by the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation with founder Dr. Dharma and actress and health activist Muriel Hemingway and myself. That'll be a 90-minute webinar that I think will be extremely informative. And again, that is free, and you can find all the information that you want on that show and can go ahead and get registered. Now, one of our guests is not going to be able to make it today, and that is Jim Crabtree. And if you're not familiar with Jim, he was on the Today Show with Maria Shriver. His wife had the disease as well as his mother, and his father took their lives and his. And there is a video on the blog that talks about this. So if you go to this episode on the blog, there is a link to that. But I would encourage you just to see what his thoughts are from the other side of this whole thing, because that was quite the catastrophe, but he views it as a gift. So I just wanted to let you know on that. We do have Steve Pottis, who's commented in the chat box. He said, I just wanted to let you know that, somebody else just bumped the comment here, that you and I have talked numerous times about making a video to stipulate when is your time and how do you want to stop driving. And we've talked about this, but this could be for end of life as well, something that is just really clear. So not just putting it in writing, but to go ahead and make a video of it. Rose is saying, I'm sorry, but I don't agree with assisted suicide. I believe a person is here for their time for a reason, whether it's for them or those around them. I also don't agree to keep a person alive with drugs or other means. So, and I really appreciate your comment, Rose, because I think there's many people out there like you. And again, I really struggle with this because I think for myself, I would say, I would like that choice because I'm just a big independent girl that I like all my choices. But I would have hated to have missed out on the moments with my mom because we made that choice, because even though she's not with us a lot cognitively, when she is, they are so magnificent that I can't even put them into words. And some may say that that's selfish. I don't know. It's one of those things that we all have to work out for ourselves. Next, I'd like to pull into the show Stanley Terman, who's a PhD, an MD and psychiatrist, and is the medical director of Caring Advocates and the author of The Best Way to Say Goodbye and Peaceful Transitions, Stories of Success and Compassion. Plan Now, Die Later. And he also has My Way cards, which is a natural dying living will cards, a tool that generates a clear and specific living will to overcome some challenges of advanced dementia, even if there's no plug to pull, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier when, it's not a feeding tube and it's not something that's keeping your heart alive. How do you do this? He has a YouTube channel as well, and I think if you put in Plan Now, Die Later Peacefully, he'll have some information for you there as well. So I'm going to pull in Stan and Dr. Stanley Terman. How are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you for having me on the show. I think it's an important show, and I have many comments to make about the presentations that we just heard. The most important of which is I've heard the word opportunity so many times as if there was no other alternative but to take your life early, because you obviously don't have the mental and probably physical wherewithal to get out of the stage of advanced dementia. By then it will be too late to have assisted, to take your own life. It will even be too late to have assisted suicide. And let me explain why. If someone does not have mental capacity, a sound mind, and another person says, here is something that you can drink that will let you die, or here is a mechanism, an apparatus that will let you die, because the patient lacks capacity to make a voluntary and willful decision, because he doesn't understand or appreciate what is about to happen, the person who's giving this assistance is not giving it for suicide, is actually causing the death, will be guilty of manslaughter or murder. Manslaughter may be a little bit easier because the patient may have asked for it previously, but it's still murder. Only in the country of Holland does the law allow euthanasia for patients who have advanced dementia. But the physicians there will not, by and large, comply with a living will that says, I want euthanasia if I'm in the advanced dementia. stage. Why won't they? Because there is not a sufficient amount of conversation contemporaneously. The Dutch doctors have been trained to have a contemporaneous conversation to focus on two things. Is the suffering unbearable? Is there no other way other than to hasten dying? That conversation is impossible in advanced dementia when the suffering is unbearable, but the catch-22 is when the conversation is possible, there is no suffering that is, as Miriam and Michael have had, this is one of the most important times in their lives. They're enjoying it, and no one would want them to hasten their dying at that point. So my caring advocates and the Natural Dying Living Will and my entire career is devoted to reducing the suffering of patients and their loved ones who face the challenge of advanced dementia, of a prolonged dying in which they would be stuck, without insisting or requiring premature dying, without taking this so-called window of opportunity. The attorney who, Robert Rivas, said, yes, we do have a right to commit suicide. And Kavanaugh was very eloquent in saying to think about it. And so did Derek Humphrey. Think about it. Discuss it with your loved ones. But there was one glaring omission that incensed me, I have to tell you, and that is you cannot make a voluntary, willful, prudent decision unless you know what all of the options are. And there is an alternative to premature dying. You don't have to miss these wonderful years. In fact, the alternative is not, it answers the question that Miriam and others have brought up. It answers the question of when do you want to think that it is time may have come so that you no longer want to prolong your dying. The question of when, it can be solved. And it's a very, very important question. If you go on the website caringadvocates.org and you click on Learn Before You Decide, you'll see a free demonstration of a tool that's actually free in itself, although a small charge is made for the living will. And there you can learn what it is like to live in the advanced stage of dementia and other terminal illnesses. And there you can learn about the end-of-life option called natural dying. That can even help patients for whom there is no plug to pull, patients who don't have a sound mind to make a decision at that point. And then you can sort the cards to generate a unique, personalized, natural dying living will to memorialize your wishes, to tell others when that time has come for the consideration of stopping treatment that is no longer benefiting you, that is only prolonging your dying, only prolonging your suffering, only prolonging the burden of your loved ones. You can live through the early stages of dementia and enjoy life tremendously. You can live through the middle stage of dementia, and it may be different. You have different values, different pleasures in life, but it's still very valuable. But you can pinpoint the time by making a decision, 48 decisions, one decision at a time. You can say, for this particular symptom or unwanted behavior or a conflict with long-term values, this I want treat and feed, or this I want natural dying. And natural dying is the key to how it all works. How does it work? Natural dying is four things. First, no one will continue to assist you if you have become dependent upon such help to put food and fluid into your mouth. That is considered to be an invasion of bodily integrity. And you can say, I definitely do not want someone to violate me, to violate my body criteria, or at least I want my proxy and my physician to consider that. Secondly, you will still be offered food and fluid to place it in front of you, which is very important for the moral rightness of this whole scenario. Because if food and fluid is in front of me, and my mind is so devastated by dementia that I do not understand how to take that food and fluid and to put it into my own mouth, then I will be allowed to die from the underlying disease of dementia. The third is that, of course, all other higher tech medical technology will be withdrawn and withhold. But what happens so frequently in dementia is you have a fairly functioning body and a mind that's just gone. So those aren't even present. But if they are, they would be eliminated, discontinued. And then the last thing is comfort care. Now, some people say, oh, it must be horrible to fast, to have no water, to have no food. That's not the case. I have fasted myself twice. I've been at the bedside of people who have gone the last chapter of their life, natural dying, and it is very peaceful. It is very comfortable. Of course, you do need to treat thirst. That is a symptom of dry mouth, which is very treatable. And Caring Advocates can send anyone who wants a thirst-reducing aid kit, and it has sprays and liquids and drops and salves and gum and all kinds of things that allow you to completely take away the symptom of thirst that's uncomfortable. Hunger is taken care of by itself. Nature does that because when you fast, you go into a metabolic state of ketosis, which provides you some euphoria, a feeling of goodness, and hunger is just wiped out. And I know that from personal experience. So you can ask for natural dying in advance by specifying when, and then you don't have to endure premature dying. No laws need to be changed. You will never get into a conflict of expensive court battles. The whole idea is for it to be private, to be peaceful, and to be effective. And it actually works.
Wonderful. Stan, I'm going to ask, how do people get a hold of you? I know you have a few different websites. CaringAdvocates.org, is that correct?
That's correct. And we have that website can lead you to the YouTube videos to explain this. It can also lead you to the Learn Before You Decide demonstration of the Natural Dying Living Will. And you can also call me at my office at 800-64-PEACE, which is 800-647-3223. And you can email me at drterman, drterman, @gmail.com.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you joining us today and sharing everything. I know that you have a Encourage Living Will survey project going on too, and so people can talk with you regarding that. But you'll get lots of a variety of information off of his site, and feel free to reach out to Stan. And I thank you for joining us today. We just have a few others I need to get in. This hour has just gone by, or this 2 hours has gone by so fast. So again, I thank you very much for taking the time to be with us and sharing with our audience some other tools that they may want to consider in this process. I'm going to go ahead and pull in.
Welcome, Lori. And
Thank you.
I think that I think if people would understand that there is another option to premature dying, and that they need to consider it. Now, there may be some people who want to give up a few years of life, and it is legal for them to do so, provided that they are fully informed. But in my opinion, it's a little complicated, a little bit more effort to complete the Natural Dying Living Will. When I talk about other living wills, I often state that it's like the 7-second solution. It's free, it's fast, but it's not effective. And the people from Final Exit Network admitted that their living will is not a legal document. It's just an indication. our documents, the ironclad strategy of the Caring Advocates Program, has been reviewed by the top health law attorneys in the country and has been strengthened by knowledge of the law that's in statute and the decisions of the courts, which is called case law. It recognizes the obligations of physicians. For example, if they don't honor your living will, it states right on the natural dying living will, "Dear doctor, please note, if you don't honor my wishes by writing orders that are consistent, you may be subject to becoming sued. You'll lose your immunity according to the law of your state, and you could be sued for malpractice. You could be sued as a criminal in a criminal court for battery, and your medical board may take sanctions against your license." So everything we've done is to make it as absolutely as sure as you can possibly be that this will work for you. And such confidence is necessary, because otherwise people might say, if I'm not sure, I better take my life now rather than later. One more thing, because you mentioned you were a Catholic, and I'll end with this, is that the natural dying procedure has been reviewed by some of the top Catholic bioethicists in the country, and it is consistent if it's done the way we prescribe, it is consistent with the teachings of the Church. It is moral, it is legal, it is ethical, and it is practical, and it is consistent with even the teachings of the Catholic Church. We do not.
I thank you, Stan, but I do need to move on to our next guest so that we get everybody in, and people can go to his website for more information. Again, everybody's views are a little bit different, and so and that's what the conversation is about, looking at choices and decisions and just having the conversation about death. It's good for all of us to have wills and living wills, and this is a topic that's very important. I'm going to pull in next. Let's see. It looks like we lost Mary Bailey. I'm not seeing her on my radar here anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and pull in Dina Dotson. Dina was diagnosed with Lewy body with probable Alzheimer's at the age of 47. She's working hard to decrease the stigma attached to dementia. And she, along with Michael, like I said, are both experts on our Dementia Chats webinar. Welcome, Dina. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you, Lori.
So what are your thoughts with this whole conversation here?
I was happy. Well, I had actually called Final Exit at one point, and so I'm a little bit familiar with how they work, and talked with a woman and was contemplating, possibly using. Well, I wanted more information from them, and so I was. And so there's that aspect of it. Living in Oregon, I really read in depth the Death with Dignity Act, and I even called the part of the government that runs that and talked with I had a very interesting conversation with the woman there. And of course, somebody with dementia, they really can't utilize the law at all unless they have a second terminal illness in addition to the and it has to be, they can't lose their mental capacity. So unless I get cancer that's, while I'm still mentally capable, I can't utilize the law. And so it's been a very interesting topic, and I've been very happy to have listened to it. And I just have very strong feelings that it is an individual choice, and one that I think should be available to anyone who would want to use it. I have also had talks with all my family members, my father, my sister, and my husband, and they are all very much aware of the way I feel.
Okay. And how did your family take this conversation? How were they with that?
They're sad. They're very sad that, of the whole, they're sad that I have this disease. They're sad that, but they have all stated to me that they understand.
Mhm.
And so I've been very thankful for that aspect of it. I've had no family member say, "Oh my goodness, what are you thinking?" I've had none of that. They've all understood. Maybe because I did have a mother that died of cancer, that died a kind of a long, drawn-out, painful death. They're a little bit more understanding of even though this isn't cancer, but it's still pretty long and drawn out. That I might not want to go that route.
Mhm. Okay. Well, it's. I mean, none of this stuff is ever an easy decision, but I'm so proud that people are having the conversation. I think it's critical. I know even with my folks, when my dad had brain cancer, and my mom with her dementia, we went in and we did the pre-planning of the funeral and all of that, and we really had some in-depth conversations of what do you want this to look like? What do you want? What do you want your obit to say? What picture do you want us to use? What do you want to be cremated or buried? I mean, all these conversations we don't have, and it's critical information in order to honor the person's life to begin with. And this is a huge piece, and we don't always understand the struggles that people are having, because again, especially with dementia, you look okay from the outside. You guys hear that all the time. Well, you look fine.
Yeah.
And so I think that's great that you're having this conversation. Do you too talk to a lot of people with dementia that are having this kind of underground conversation that's not really out in the public? Do you hear a lot of conversation about this topic?
I bring it up every now and then, and I've had different reactions across the board. I've had, with people that have the disease, it's kind of not really surprising, but there's always an understanding of why why I feel this way. Mm-hmm. Some people agree, some people, don't necessarily feel comfortable with it, and I respect it all. Again, there's one thing that I always try to, stress is that it's so individual. It's what every individual would want to choose, and that's so. Yes, I've had a lot of conversation, and it's been a wide variety, but the very bottom line is there's always an understanding of why they understand why a person would choose this.
Okay, wonderful. Anything else that you want to address? Our time is just running, just ticking off the clock here. We might have to have a follow-up show on this one.
Well, I was just happy to be on the show with these people that are a part of it and attempt to have the conversation and learn.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dina. You're just a blessing. You have such great insights, and I appreciate so much all that you share with us on the radio, on the dementia chats, on the social network groups that you have. You just are so open about living with this disease and what it's like. So thank you very much for all you do for all of us. I'm going to go ahead and pull Robert back in. He had a comment that he wanted to make, and Robert, I can give you like a minute if you wanted to make a comment off of something you heard.
Yeah, the doctor from the Caring Advocates program, some of the things he said about the law are just completely untenable. There's no way that any healthcare institution could legally discontinue using a hand to put food and drink in the mouth of somebody unless the person is competent and is requiring it at that time. An advance signature on a so-called advance directive directing that somebody not be fed when they can't use their hands anymore, when they're not competent, could never be enforced in any state. And the advice you've heard is going to run the very serious risk of somebody getting beyond the window of opportunity and then finding that the proposal for this natural death thing doesn't work and leaves you in exactly the position you wanted to avoid.
Okay. Well, I thank you for that clarification. And again, we encourage everybody to, check out all the information and, make their decisions. And, you should, whenever you're dealing with a will or healthcare declaration, you should be also talking with an attorney. Because laws are different in every state, and if you're going to do this, you want to do it right, and make sure that things are accurate, and that the understanding that you're understanding things in the way that they'll really happen. Because sometimes our perceptions of others' words fall in a little different place. So I appreciate that clarification very much. So thank you, Robert.
Sure.
Michael, I'm going to go ahead and pull you in. We've got just a couple of minutes to wrap up here. Kathy Pure was not able to connect with us. She lost her connection, as was Mary Bailey. Kathy was going to talk about hospice, which is just an absolute wonderful option for people to have in terms of having, comfort in the end of life. But we'll do another show on hospice in and of itself. We do have some in the archives as well if people are interested. But that is definitely an option for end of life. But Michael, what are your thoughts in terms of wrapping up this program?
Well, I guess while I have this terrible disease, I, like many others, we would like to live life to the fullest for many more years. We just don't want to be around when it gets bad. While I believe this is not for everyone, people should have the right to choose and not be denied the right to die with what I call dignity. This is all we want. I keep praying that I get a serious form of cancer. That would at least take care of my life much and make it much easier for me to die. So I hope people hear us today and help us change.
I agree. It is about having choice. It is about having open conversations. It's about removing stigmas, and we all should have the right to live with dignity. That shouldn't be denied to anybody. So, my hope for today's discussion is that people learn something new. They may not have agreed with it. Again, I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking that you listen. Listen to the thoughts of others, listen to the options available, and have the discussion. Even if you are adamant and it's against your religion and, this is the way you want it, make that clear to others. That's the whole point of this, is making your wishes clear to others so that you can live the life that you intend. And again, everybody's intentions are just a little bit different. So I thank you all so much for being part of this. Michael, do you want to go ahead and plug your website and your book too? I've given everybody else an opportunity to plug theirs, so feel free.
Sure. My book is called From the Insiders. It's From the Corner Office to Alzheimer's. And my website is michaelellenbogen.com, and that's Michael, MichaelEllenbogen.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for listening. We would love to hear if you have comments. Go to the blog, AlzheimersSpeaks.com. You can get to the blog from our main website and note your comments. We'd love to hear the conversation, and maybe we have to have a follow-up show on this. There's multiple sides to the coin here, and again, Alzheimer's Speaks is about raising everyone's voice. So we would love to hear your thoughts and your comments about living with dignity, and we'll talk soon. Next show is next Tuesday at the same time. So bye now, and thanks for being part of the conversation.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebestier, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.